So thank you very much for your time. I'll be happy to respond to questions from the committee.
Thank you, Senator Essman. At this point, I'll ask Sue O'Connell to go over the two amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. At your places this afternoon, you should have had a few documents, and the first one that I'll speak to are the amendments that were requested by Representative Smith, and those look like a regular set of amendments with SB 042323.ASO at the bottom. And there also were copies in the back for audience members. This set of amendments would be a substitute bill to the bill that's in front of you. So if you read it in its current format, that's what it would look like if it was put into bill form. And I just want to try to highlight some of the key changes that the amendments would make to Senate Bill 423. First of all, it would eliminate the licensing structure entirely and the use of growers, infused products manufacturers, and other businesses. It would maintain the Department of Public Health and Human Services registration of patients and caregivers, but caregivers would now be called providers. It eliminates the list of debilitating medical conditions for which a person could receive a medical marijuana card, and instead has a physician determine if a person has a debilitating medical condition. And the physician would be required to attest to several factors related to the condition when they provide written certification. And those factors are spelled out on pages 6 and 7 of the amendments. It also eliminates the requirement that 2 physicians provide written certification for chronic pain. DPHHS, after they issue a card to a cardholder or a provider, would notify local law enforcement agencies of the cardholders who are living in their jurisdictions. Providers would be limited to growing marijuana for one person generally and without compensation, or they could grow for a maximum of 3 people if 2 of the cardholders were related to the provider by the 2nd degree of kinship or marriage. Cardholders could have 4 mature plants, 12 seedlings, and 1 ounce of usable marijuana. That's slightly lower in terms of the amount of usable marijuana that's allowed in Senate Bill 423 currently. And the 4 mature plants compares to 6 plants right now that cardholders can have. The bill would also limit where people can cultivate or manufacture marijuana, and it would place limitations on where people may use it or in what circumstances they're prohibited from using it that are very similar to Senate Bill 423. Those limitations are on pages 9 and 10 of the amendments. There are a couple of additional provisions in there. For example, students who are registered cardholders would not be allowed to participate in extracurricular activities if a school adopted a policy to that effect. And there are some more stringent provisions related to driving under the influence if you're a registered cardholder. There's also a new forfeiture provision on page 11, and that is stricter than the current law. And then on page 19, the amendments would repeal the existing medical marijuana law, just as Senate Bill 423 does in its current form. The repeal would occur on July 1st, and the new law would go into effect then. If you move on to the second set of amendments from proposed by Representative Noonan, there were a couple of documents you had. One was a short back and front 1-page summary of some of the key provisions, and then the other one is this document that is not a formal amendment, but it shows you what would be added and what would be stricken if the amendments were adopted. And I do have an actual set of amendments that are prepared but have not been edited, so if you want to consider those today, they do exist. The amendments proposed by Representative Noonan, some of the key changes for patients would add PTSD as a condition for which a person could obtain a card. Would delete the requirement for 2 physicians to certify for severe and chronic pain, but maintain that requirement for patients who are minors. It would eliminate the medical advisory board established in Senate Bill 423 and instead allow DPHHS to consult with medical experts to decide whether to add additional debilitating medical conditions to the list. DPHHS would still report to the Board of Medical Examiners on physicians who certify a certain number of patients in a year. It would increase that number from 25, which is in the current form of SB 423, to 50. And then moving on to the licensing provisions, it moves the licensing authority from the Department of Labor and Industry, where it ended up on the Senate floor, and put it with the Department of Agriculture. The amendments also would eliminate couriers as people who transport marijuana, and instead allow growers and infused products manufacturers to do that from their locations, or to have up to 2 discrete offices depending on the number of card holders that they have. And then it would repeal the existing Medical Marijuana Act on January 1st rather than on July 1st. And I think those are some of the key provisions. The others you can read on the summary sheet.
A little information. The proponents, which I will call first, should be people who support SB 423 in its current form, and would also like it if Representative Noonan's amendments were added. Now, you could support it and not like the amendments. Opponents would be those who totally oppose SB 423 in any form, or would support 423 only if it had amendments proposed by Representative Smith, or you could go with Representative Noonan. That's a little confusing, but if you think you're confused, no, I'm just kidding. What I would like to do is ask for the proponents, and I would like you to be as short and concise as possible. Can I have the hands of all those that are proponents? Let's see, going to get it, hold them up for a second, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, 14 maybe. Okay, I'm going to give you real close to 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, for the proponents. And I will do the same for the opponents, but I will be a little flexible in that. Would the proponents step forward?
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question, because I am very confused. And just so everybody understands, we're really talking about 3 bills here. I mean, these are 3 entirely different packages. And I guess for the record, I want it to be reflected that one of the packages, it looks like we just received an hour ago. April 6, 2002 is Representative Smith's amendments, which I even heard Sue O'Connell reference as a substitute bill. So we're really looking at a bill that we've seen an hour ago. I bring that up because I don't know what the proponents and opponents are testifying. Are they going to just say which of the 3 bills that they support, and then the opponents are going to say which of the 3 bills they oppose? Is that sort of the idea?
Representative Hill, there was a lot of discussion on how to conduct this hearing, and we thought the only fair way would be to be able to go through the proponents and first explain the amendments as best we could, and have the proponents or opponents state their position. Now, I'll try to go through the process one more time. Proponents should be people who support SB 423 in its current form, or would like the amendments of Representative Noonan's. Now, I did make a misstatement. The opponents should be those people who oppose SB 423 in any form, and would support it with Representative Smith's amendments.
I don't get it.
Okay, Representative Fury. Maybe I can make that clearer in another way.
Mr. Chair, what if they're opposed to all of this?
Then I think they could be an opponent and be
Still
opposed
an
to all.
opponent.
And I just wanted the witnesses to be able to say whether they were for or against the amendments.
So wouldn't they be a proponent of Representative Carey's amendments then, not an opponent of?
Everything.
So you said you're a proponent if you support Espin's bill, or if you support Noonan's amendments to Espin's bill, but you're an opponent if you.
Yeah.
Maybe it might be easier to say.
That's what he said, right?
You like either or neither set of amendments.
Yeah. Would Sue O'Connell help me explain this a little clearer way?
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, It's a little more confusing because you have the amendments in advance. Often when you hear a bill, you don't get the amendments until after the hearing or during executive action. But these amendments were posted to our website yesterday to try to give people some advance notice. And because of the tight time frames, there was a lot of discussion, as Representative Howard said, as to how to proceed. But typically during a hearing, if somebody supported the bill that was in front of them, they would come up and speak as a proponent. If they did not support the bill, they would speak as an opponent. If they came up to the podium and said, I support the bill, but only if it's heavily amended, the chairman would usually rule them to be an opponent to the bill as before the committee at the moment. So that's why if people here support either set of amendments and only support the bill with amendments, they would be considered opponents at this moment. And you could take their testimony on the amendments into consideration during your executive action. If they support the bill as it's currently before them, or they support it with the addition of Representative Noonan's amendments, either way, then they would be proponents. But this is a little different just because you have extensive amendments in front of you before the hearing starts.
Let's think of it this way. If you come to the podium as a proponent, then I will give you a leeway and tell me which amendments you're for. If you're against this bill, but for one of the amendments, you would be an opponent, but for an amendment. And that, am I making it clear?
No.
Okay. Huh? Representative Noonan.
So
You have a suggestion?
I think like just to try to clear it up then. So if a person only liked 423 with my amendments on it, then they would rise as an opponent unless the bill is amended. If they like the bill and they like my amendments or they don't like them, they rise as a proponent. If they don't like 423 because they like Representative Smith's amendments, then they are also an opponent.
Yes.
Okay.
Are we clear?
So they're only,
Do the best you can.
Muddle our way through.
Go ahead.
It's called
I
politics.
think what we'll do is we'll start to muddle our way through here and do the best job we can. And at least we're going to get the testimony, okay? So I will start with